Thank you. We have a quorum.
All right, takes us to public comment. Anyone here from the public wish to be heard? At this time, there'll be another opportunity for public comment during the regular meeting as well, but anybody at this point like to address the MCAG board? All right, seeing none, takes us to item 3, which is our tipping fee study workshop. Mr. Moore.
Again, we're here to talk about the tip fee study. Last month we held our 2-hour workshop where we presented the findings of the tip fee analysis and talked about different numbers, different approaches to implementing the tip fee. We took the feedback that we received from that session and have come back in your package. You have some tables. We took the fee increases out the full 10 years as was asked. We also looked at what would happen if we normalized the rates to where all the jurisdictions were paying the same rate. That increase was also spread out over that 10-year period. And then we also took those same tables and then reset them again, assuming the tip fee increase did not get implemented until July 1st, 2024. So you basically have 2 sets of charts. We can just go ahead and jump into those.
James, while you're doing that, I gave them these white folders with all the material, so just to orient you to it, on the left side of your packet is just the staff report that's in your regular agenda, just if there was something there you wanted to reference. Also on the right side, the back document is the PowerPoint from the previous presentation, and then as James mentioned, there are 2 basic options, and they're the 2 smaller packets on the right. One says geographic status quo, and the other says normalized gate rate. So those are the 2 options we'll be talking about. Sorry, I just wanted to walk through. And there is a duplication. There was also a copy of the PowerPoint that was loose on your desk. So that is what I believe that will be used today. So lots of information. Sorry. Thanks, James.
So yeah, just to jump back real quick, this slide shows the reserve fund balance projection without the tip fee increase. And as you can see, somewhere there in about the 27, 28 year period, that green line drops down below the yellow and orange, which are our projected fund reserve minimums. So when we jump over, quick note, one of the items we heard at the workshop last month was some input that, initially we were looking at raising all of the gate fee items, including some of the ancillary type fees we have for inert materials and appliances and things. Philip went back and we took that increase out. We only applied the increase to the MSW rate. So that took us to that 6.05% instead of, I believe it was 5.2 you saw on the charts last month. Again, here we've taken the rate out all the way through 2032, 33. And you can see on the bottom of the chart there, the green line, our reserve fund balance, does drop a little bit below the yellow line about 8 years from now, but then it stabilizes and comes back up above there, and we stay above the orange, our minimum reserve for closure, post-closure throughout the 10-year period. The next slide, and you had to go back and learn calculus again, right?
Yeah.
This was a little more difficult to interpolate the rates based on the current geographic difference in the rates at each agency. Philip's team did a great job on pulling these numbers together. What you can see is typically that means we've got anywhere from a 5.5% rate increase to about 8% for the agencies that are paying the lowest cost right now. And then again, that's taken out through fiscal year 2032-33, where everybody ends up at $68.50 a ton. So that's kind of a step-by-step into that process. And then again, if we delay the increase until next year, we go from 6.05 to 7.2, so that we end up at the same place in 2033. Basically, we've delayed that action a year, the rate has to increase a little bit in order for us to end up at the same point. You see, again, we've got, under this scenario, we do have a slightly longer dip in the reserve fund balance before it comes back up, but we do end up back in positive territory by 2033. And again, if we normalize those rates across the agencies, now you're looking at anywhere from about a 6.5% to about a 9.5% increase beginning next year, and then ending up just over $71 a ton by 2033. So our intent today was just let you look at these numbers. We have an action item on the regular agenda a little later this afternoon where we will ask the board for direction as to which one of these options, either maintaining the geographic separation or normalizing, and what implementation date you'd like to see. So at this point, we're open to questions. The idea here, we can talk about the different numbers you're seeing.
Clarify two things. One, I did want to mention for anyone in the audience that wants a hard copy that I just walked through, there are white folders up here next to the agendas that you can take. And just a point of clarification, James is right. There is a requested action at the end of the regular agenda for this, asking for your direction on which to pursue. That action then will be formalized and will be on your agenda for the adoption of the fee increase, the schedule, and the start date in April.
Okay. James, that's the bulk of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, questions? Anybody? Director Silvera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on when you were coming up with these numbers and doing all your calculus on these, did you take into consideration? So I know. So what I'm leaning toward is the normalizing the rates over the period of time. That's what I think is. I don't think I'll get much pushback from my colleagues. That we think the fair thing to do is eventually. I wasn't here when those rates got. I would invite Director Nelson to come and sit up here. He's a part of this conversation.
I think that's the last time we raised it when he was here.
Yeah. So
You're asking him to explain.
no. Well, he might have been on.
The only one.
So I don't understand. My logic tells me that maybe it was just they were looking at kind of like here's what a rate to get garbage to the dump is, and if you live further away, you're going to pay more in trucking, and so whatever. It is what it is. I think the fair thing to do is that everybody pays the same rate. I like phasing it in over time so that not one jurisdiction is just getting hammered with a really big increase. But when you were coming up with these numbers, when you were normalizing these rates, did you take into consideration the volume? Is that part of that calculus or that you figured? Because when you think about a jurisdiction like Dos Palos and Gustine, they're going up at a higher rate. I get that, to get there. But tonnage wise, if you go down a little bit or up a little bit in the city of Las Manas or Merced, when you're figuring that fund balance and the revenues generated, I don't care if it's a 1% increase in Las Manas or Merced, dollars wise at the end is going to end up as a lot more than if you did a 5% rate increase for Dos Palos or Gustine. So was that figured into it, or is it just strictly looked at the starting money and how over the course of X amount of years do we get to where it equals the same?
It was the latter. We looked at how do we get everyone to the same rate and plug the fund balance gap that we had. We didn't give discounts for volume.
So I guess then for me it's really the graphs aren't a true representation of what the revenue is going to be.
I guess we took into the total volume that is going into the landfill, and we did play with scenarios where if we raised, Dos Palos, that would not have the impact on the fund balance that raising Merced would have. So we used weighted averages to come up with how much money we needed across all the jurisdictions.
Okay, so then those revenue numbers are representative of just total tonnages, not necessarily that X amount of tons came from Merced, X amount of tons came from Las Manas.
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't go per jurisdiction. For these charts, we do have per jurisdiction by every material type by year with all sorts of growth factors and recessions and all of that planned in the background.
Okay. I just wanted to jump out there and say I think that getting the rates to where there's parity, over a period of time is probably an easier pill for everybody to swallow. That's at least my opinion. And then I really like the idea of starting in fiscal year 24-25. And the reason behind that is I know some of the smaller jurisdictions have just went through rate increases. And so to have to stack back-to-back ones up on them isn't always fun. And then two, when you look at timeline-wise, we're at a March meeting. We're going to hopefully give direction to put something on an April meeting. Gets passed in April. That doesn't give you very much time to be able to do a 218. I don't think it's fair to ask those any jurisdiction, and I don't care whether it would be the county, whether it be one of the larger cities or smaller cities. That's not something typically that anybody does in-house on their own. That requires hiring consultants, and there's all kinds of stuff that has to be done with that. And so I think it's an unrealistic approach to ask people to try to, if they need to do a 218. I think in the county's sake, our contracts are written in a way that we don't do 218s. They're built-in increases, CPI increases on them. But for the jurisdictions that have to do it, I just don't think that it's fair to ask them to have to turn that around in such a short amount of time. I think we're setting ourselves up for failure if we do that. So, again, my recommendation would be is that we do the phase-in approach to where at the end of fiscal year 32-33, we all end up at the same rate. But with that starting in fiscal year 24-25, and that gives everybody plenty of time to prepare for what's coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With direction, how much do we want to turn into Stacy right now? How much is it intended to be discussed right now during the workshop, or should we wait till later on for the discussion item, which is item 16 on the agenda?
Yeah. So for the purpose of the workshop, it's just to give you to have the discussion. We are not during the workshop wanting to arrive at any conclusion, but the hope is that this time is spent having the discussion required. That there would still be public comment and opportunity for discussion at the regular agenda item, but that essentially the kinks have been worked out and that the board is feeling like there's going to be some level of consensus. Okay. So no action here.
Okay.
Can I have one follow comment?
Yeah.
Sorry for that, Mr. Chair. That wasn't my direction. I was just letting everybody know where I was leaning toward to give the direction later.
All right. So go ahead, Director Yanis.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding the rates as far as, like, let's say from a private hauler. So somebody shows up at the dump with a trailer full of garbage. Are we asking where they live? Are we asking, like, how does that rate get factored in? I mean, is everybody just saying they're from Dos Palace? I mean, how does that work out?
If a private individual comes in that way, they're going to pay our standard gate rate,
Okay.
which will also increase by these percentages
Okay.
whenever, under whatever implementation we follow.
Okay. That was, again, I was just curious. Somebody's doing a job in a certain jurisdiction and how that gets factored in. So, okay, thank you.
Good question.
We all say we're from Los Banos.
Director Nagy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question following up on Director Silvera's. I like that idea, but how would that affect the numbers? Would those numbers be spread out over?
We would end up.
I mean, because we're like Gustine, I think was 8.1% the first 2 years. Does that mean would be 16% the first year increase, or would you rework all the numbers going out to 32?
If we were to start July 1st, 2024, Gustine would be looking at an 8.10% increase to normalize. Pushing it back a year puts you at 9.5%.
Okay.
And then that increase rate stays consistent through the 10-year period. And again, we've talked, now that we have this model built, we'll be able to update it annually every couple of years. If we go through a recession, some other economic impact hits, we'll be able to update these numbers, come back to the board and say, okay, things have been worse than we expected, or they've been better than we expected. And we can, make a determination then whether some annual rates might be deferred, or we may have to adjust a little bit the other direction.
Could we, Mary Michael or Marissa, can we put the slide up that has starting in 24-25, the next, I think it's.
That's it.
This is it.
They switched it.
Oh, it's just.
No, the 20, That says 23, 24, so I'm,
But it's wrong,
Yeah, so the date's incorrect on the slide.
Yeah, the first column for 23, 24 is all
Okay.
0.
well, okay. So on your printout, it is the second page. So if you're wanting to see those numbers up close, because it's a little hard for me to read. All right. Sorry, because on the one I'm looking at, it was correct. So my mistake.
All right. Director Bedrosian, you have that thoughtful look on your face?
Yeah, we got fancy buttons here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
And then, listen, I don't think that any of us, it's lost on any of us, that any kind of increase is always a challenge for our bosses. But I also want to remind everybody that the rates are pretty low. They haven't been raised for a long, long time. And so when you talk about an 8 or a 7 or a 10%, I would encourage you to look at that bottom slide that shows you, you know, what the rate would go from if we started in 24, 25. You know, for example, the city of Atwater, you would go from 37.48 to 40.25, and that represents a 7.38% increase. For the city of Los Manis, you would go from 40.21 to 42.84. It's when you're looking at it in total dollars amount, it's a little, and every year it gets a little bit bigger, but I just think it's something. I'm in agreement that we have to do something, and especially when we look kind of longer term on importation, and you know, it's kind of that double-edged sword with importation. You bring it in, and you're bringing in all this additional revenue, but you're selling airspace for a cheaper rate than what our own residents are going to be able to use it at. And I think by us increasing rates, it gives us the ability to have those honest conversations. Do we want to stop bringing in import stuff and only keeping what space we have for our residents? And without a rate increase, I don't think that's possible. So just another little bit of food for thought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, two big questions. Obviously, do we start in 23, 24, 24, 25, and then the geographic status quo or the normalization seems to be the two big decision points. 4 possible options from what you presented. Okay. Anybody else? I think we all, after that study session a few weeks ago, that one night plus, I think everybody seems to be pretty familiar with the topic. So, yeah, go ahead, Director Pereira.
Thank you, Chair. So this the rate increases. And I guess really, especially compared to the reserve fund balance, does not include importation, or does include?
It includes the current importation, but it stops at the end of the board approved time frame.
Which is 2027?
27, roughly, yep. Okay. Concurrent with the bond repayment.
Yeah, okay. You know, I think we're so I'm looking at, basically we're darn near doubling our rates in 10 years. And although it's nice for the cities, the county gets to pick up the trash that gets on the side of the road, because most of the time it's not in, you know, they're going out in the country and dumping it. And so if we're gonna double the rates, you know, then I think we need to look at some sort of mitigation to the trash dumped on the side of the roads. And then, you know, I mean, picking these rates and going out, well, it'll be 9 years, I guess, if we don't start till next year. Before we've really decided what we're going to do with imports, you know, is also, I think, a little, you know, inaccurate, I guess is the way to say it. You know, I don't know. I mean, if we raise the rates for imports and it cuts in half the amount of trash we're getting, however, they're paying their, well, you know, their fair share for the airspace, then we'd probably be able to leave the rates a little lower for our own citizens, our constituents. So, you know, I just think we're taking this all like we know all the answers, or we have all the variables, and I don't know that we really do. But you know, I'm just sitting here trying to process this, you know, and you know, you know, I get the thought of everybody pays the same when you get to the landfill, but really, that's not the rate, right? The customers pay the rate, which is the cost at the landfill plus freight. And you know, and I tried to do the math, and whoever did these rates back in the day didn't just do it by distance, right? There was some sort of had to be some sort of other consideration in the rates. You know, so if I'm from Dos Palos, then, you know, so let's put a landfill out in Dos Palos, let's add one more. And so my freight is the same as everybody else's freight. So to go to making the tipping fee even doesn't make it even for the constituents. And if back when the county was the landfill, the waste management, you know, everybody paid the same, right? So the tipping fees may have been different, but your freight offset it, right? You didn't pay more for freight if you're in Dos Palos or Gustine than if you were on Bellevue Road here in Merced, right? So I don't know. Have we looked at all this? I mean, is any of this making sense to anybody else that's on the board? So anyways, I'll leave it there, and hopefully that has spurred some more discussion.
Okay. All right. Thoughts, discussion spurred by?
I just want to confirm, and I'm going to look at Nav and James and Philip, but I believe the existing rate structure predates the transition from the county to us. I think that's part of the struggle of us not having the documentation, but that was the only. And I think you're right. I think it's something there had to have been a formula or something that went into that. We just haven't been able to. I inherited the understanding, and I think many of our colleagues have, that there was a geographic consideration from the hauling costs, but I agree with you. There had to have been something else, and we don't know what those other variables were.
And if I might, Mr. Chair, but just, you know, so if this happens, it could turn out that the residents of the city of Merced will have the cheapest rates in the county, right? If you take their tipping fee plus their freight, right? So anyways, that's just my thoughts.
Good. Director Espinosa.
Well, excuse me, I kind of agree with Director Pereira on most of the things, and I agree. I think we should stay with the geographic status quo. You know, smaller cities tend to have lower income communities, not necessarily, right? But still, like I said, you know, most of the unincorporated or far away from the landfills, most of the communities. So it's not the same, and it's better to go ahead and implement it in 23, 24 than waiting for 24, 25. You know, when you're going to increase it to 8 or 9%, I don't agree with that. It's just going to hit, you know, people harder. It's already, you know, inflation is very high, and might as well implement it. And it's a 6% across the board for everybody. And in the end, like I said, it just it's a lot anyway. 5-6%, you know, it's a lot of increase, and most of the communities will be paying over 100%. And the cities, I understand that, you know, the bigger cities will be paying a little bit more, but still, I think that, you know, there's more services in the bigger the cities and less services in the smaller communities. So I think we should stay with the geographic status quo. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other thoughts, comments? Go ahead, Director Nagy.
I kind of went back and forth on this myself, but one thing that nobody's pointed out is that, because you're thinking, well, it's an 8% increase or 9% increase or whatever it is, but that's per ton. That's not per customer. So when this goes back to John Q. Public, he's not going to see an 8 or 9% increase in his bill because he's not throwing away a ton of garbage. He's throwing away 40 or 50 pounds of this and 100 pounds of that and so forth.
That's correct. Disposal is only one portion of their rate. You're going to have labor in there. They have
Right.
recyclables, processing, and quite a few others. So they might see maybe a third of the 8%.
And then as far as the as far as the transportation, I get it, but if you've got a Merced that's a big metropolis, they've got how many more trucks making that trip every single day compared to a smaller city. So, I mean, really, if you think about it, you know, you're gonna have 50 trucks going out there to every 10 or 5 of a smaller city. So I don't think there's really that you can quantify what the freight is different. So I don't, you know, and I don't know what their formula was back in the day, but, you know, I think I lean more towards Director Silvera's that we normalize it. But I also think that, you know, you guys are the professionals and you guys are the ones that have all the numbers and you know, you've been in the business for a long time, and it's got to be a viable agency. So,
You know, the reality comes down to, at the end of the day, as you said, the cost of that cubic yard of airspace is the same regardless of where the waste is coming from. So that does kind of lean into it. And I think you guys looked a little bit at current haul rates. Again, since each jurisdiction is going out for a competitive bid for hauling, you know, there's some, I don't want to say give and take, but, you know, the individual haulers are having to kind of fine-tune that penciling in there. So again, when we try to go back and compare freight rate from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, it's not a straight line at all.
To what extent are the bigger jurisdictions or the closer, essentially, in effect, Los Banos and the city of Merced, the closer jurisdictions and the bigger jurisdiction, being the two biggest jurisdictions in the city as well, to what extent do they not, I mean, subsidize probably isn't the right word, but just by providing an economy of scale, allow those smaller jurisdictions or the farther jurisdictions to, you know, have a better rate, have a better service, just by everybody kind of joining together and then piggybacking on, you know, a big customer like that? Is that, you know, I'm not trying to make up, I'm just asking, is that a...
I couldn't say numbers, but it's a significant benefit. If Dos Palos was running a landfill by themselves, they'd have to pay the scale attendant and all the operators, and they'd be using, you know, maybe 10% of their capacity. They would, you know, you're just not going to get the economies of scale or the efficiency that you would have by having a larger jurisdiction, anchor tenants like Los Banos and the city of Merced.
Is it impossible to put a, you know, kind of put a rough ballpark, best you can, you know, what sort of benefit would...
That'd be irresponsible for me to try to calculate that here.
It's almost St. Patrick's Day. We're asking. Okay. No, thank you. All right. Your questions, thoughts? All right.
One more question.
Yeah, we still
And
got
I know this is for discussion purposes only, but so you look at a set of numbers on a sheet of paper that goes out 10 years, 10 years. What is later on in the meeting, is that what we're agreeing to set that as to come back as the new rate increase that if we were to vote yes on it, we would be increasing each jurisdiction by X over the next 10 years? Is that what we would be voting on in the April meeting?
I believe the intent would be that would be the maximum rate for purpose of your 218 processes. Again, as we said, now that we have the model and we can update it annually, we'll be able to see where we're at. And we can come back in each year and say, you know, okay, the economy was better, we didn't see a drop in tonnages, our reserve line is here. Maybe in 2028, 2029, we don't have to do that 9.5% increase or that 7% increase. Maybe we come back and say we can get away with 3% and we'll maintain our reserve. That'll be an action item that the board will take each year.
Each year?
But for the purpose of the 218, we've got to set a maximum rate.
Perfect.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that also addresses Director Pereira's concern around not really knowing what the impact of the increased rate for importation is going to have. But that's the trigger where, if we're watching this kind of sets the stage that with board action next month, this is the course that we're going to be implementing, but we're going to be monitoring it annually and having discussions with the board and looking at how does the increased rate impact importation, how does the economy impact importation, and all of the other factors that we talked about. So this is like setting the stage of saying, holding all other things equal, this is our path over the next 10 years that we will be discussing periodically, but also giving us the flexibility with this board's direction to adjust as our environment changes on the better side of it. Meaning if we don't need an 8%, we can go with a 6%. I mean, that would all be done here at this body, but absent of that direction, this is for the 218 process, this is what we would be planning for.
Did you guys do any analysis or any discussion of the current rates with the geographical differences? You know, and what, how rational those are? What
We did go back and try to reconstruct. We ran transportation models, and what we found is that there's some other factors that must have been included at the time. It's not solely based on our type of modeling. It would not be solely transportation by measuring the distance from the center of the city to the landfill, multiplying by the hourly rates and the tons.
Okay.
There's also a lot of other factors built into the service rates. It's going to be the profit margin of the haulers. There's going to be what type of system they're using. If you have Jilt and they're taking that to their MRF and then they're taking the residue from the processing and bringing that to the landfill. So there's a lot of different operational concerns. It's not just the taking the trash to the landfill that's built into your service rates.
How did your numbers look? How did your numbers differ from the current ones, if you remember?
I'd have to go back and look, but they were fairly significantly different.
Do you recall? How so, to the best of your recollection? Not holding you to anything,
Yeah, probably 10 or 15% in some instances. There's some variability in there. And also, at the time that the rates were constructed, there was definitely different hauling arrangements, right? Atwater's out to bid right now, Livingston's out to bid.
Okay.
Los Banos went through a competitive procurement since then.
Did they tend to be closer together or farther apart, or just kind of a mix and all over the place?
It was a mix. There was no real rationalization that we could come to for how they got to it.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. All right. Anybody else? All right. No more. Anything else you guys like to add? It's 2:35 right now, so we got about 25 minutes for the regular meeting. Any other comments?
We can't.
We could turn it over to Scotty at 25 more minutes to speak. Here's your opportunity. All right. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you, and we'll address this again, hopefully with some direction later on in the meeting. So thank you both. All right. We're adjourned until 3 o'clock. right, it's now 3 o'clock. We'll call the March 16th, 2023 meeting of the Merced County Association of Governments to order and begin with roll call. Mayor Michael.
Mr. Chair, Director Espinoza.
Present.
Director Hoag. Here. Director Yanez.
Here.
Director McDaniel.
Present.
Director Moran.
Present.
Director Nagy.
Here.
Director Nelson.
Here.
Director Pereira.
Here.
Director Silvera.
Present.
Director Pedroso.
Here.
Chair Serrato.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. Now to the invocation. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to lead the invocation? Okay, seeing none, we have Director Pereira, who is ready. So Lloyd, if you could lead us in the invocation before our meeting and also in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir.
Heavenly Father. I like to hear myself talk.
There it is.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we ask you into this chamber. We ask for your guidance. We ask for your wisdom. And we ask that you would continue to bless us here in Merced County. Lord, I pray that you would give wisdom and insight to each of the directors, that they might make good decisions that benefit the citizens of Merced County. Lord, and we pray for our neighbors to the south and to the north who have had a tremendous amount of flooding. And for some reason, you chose to spare us this past weekend. And we're thankful for that. But we ask that you keep people safe and that your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen.
I can lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Lloyd. Takes us to item 5, which is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair. If I could ask that we move item
16?
16 to item 10.
Okay. What if we 10 and 11 should be really quick? What if we move it to just between 11 and 12?
That's fine by me.
That work?
That's fine by me. And
Okay.
with that, I would make a motion to approve the agenda with the stated changes.
I'll second that because I'll be leaving at 4:30.
Okay. It seems like we have a number of folks, Director Pedroso, Espinosa, Silvera have to leave at 4:30. Does anybody else have to leave early? Right, Director Pereira as well?
Not at 4:30, but early.
Okay. All right, we'll talk fast. All right, motion, was there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any opposition to the motion? Okay, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Takes us to public comment. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on any item that's not on the agenda? Now's your time. Okay, also we have a Spanish interpreter available as well, so if anybody needs the assistance of the Spanish language interpreter, who's right there, we have that service available as well. All right, takes us to item 7. Welcome our Congress member, John Duarte. Congressman Duarte, thank you for being here today. Now you have a chance to address this body. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the entire group, the Council of Governments. It's an honor to be your congressman. I want to be very engaged with each and every one of you, make sure that we're doing whatever we can do to make this part of our valley a better place. And I have been engaged with a number of you already, and I'm very thankful for that. I like the phone calls. I like to know what it is we can do from the federal government side of things to help the local government, and I'm there for you. Give you a little background. I'm a farmer and a businessman from the Modesto area. First time in office, so be gentle. No, seriously, don't. Just hit me in the head. Let's just get this neophyte stage over with, so I can do as much as I can for you. So I want to be very open to your input. I'm on a few committees because there's a narrow majority in our party. There's a lot of committee assignments for everyone in the party because, of course, the party in the majority wants to have the majority on every committee. So I'm on great committee assignments. I'm on agriculture, I'm on transportation infrastructure, and I'm on natural resources. So as we start looking at some of the flood control, the groundwater recharge, the water resources management, it kind of comes over that whole bailiwick committee assignments I've got. Then my subcommittees, if it says water on it, I'm on that subcommittee. I'm on the Rails and Hazardous Materials Subcommittee. I'm on the Highways and Transit Subcommittee in T&I. I'm on the Waterways Subcommittee in T&I. So 3 committee assignments there. I'm on Risk Management, Credit, and Commodities on Ag, so I'll be able to talk a lot about crop insurance to the local farmers, a lot about the farm credit system. And then I'm also on the Conservation, Biotechnology, and Research Subcommittee, so I'll be able to do as much as I can do for the local universities and making sure they're playing a role in our ag research efforts through federal resources. So happy with my committee assignments. There's more bigger, there's more powerful committees, but there are none that are more relevant specifically to this district. And so I'll be hoping to engage through that. One of my first legislative priorities as my own, and I don't even know if it's legislative or just working with the agencies, we have to, and this isn't just something because of recent events, we have to dredge our drainage system. It needs dredging, it needs regular dredging, it needs standing permits to keep it dredged. Obviously, we want to prevent the flooding, but it has some habitat value, it has some restoration value too. I'm hoping we can get some of the agencies on board and some of the NGOs on board with us. We can do better for the fish and habitat value by dredging and by getting higher safe river flows. We can also use that to hold more water in our reservoirs. Flood control is always a function of how bad might it get and what do we do once it gets that bad. If we have more flood control spill capacity, we have less headspace needed in the dams for flood control contingencies. So dredging the river channels and the creek channels not only protects your communities in the valley here a lot better, it lets us store more water in the reservoir every year. Because even though it's a 1 in 50 year flood, we never know what year that flood's gonna come. So it's a big priority. I think it makes a lot of common sense. We will be having field hearings down at the Tillery Ag Center on April 11th. I'm working with Congressman Valadeo's office to understand exactly who's going to be our witness set on that and what our key strategy with that hearing is. But that covers one direction. I really want to take it. Community funding projects are coming through. You guys have submitted some. I'm very, very happy to help with those. I am here to deliver for the Valley. I'm here to deliver for the district. I have no philosophical impingements against getting Merced County and its cities what is needed to keep these communities working right. We're on the heels of COVID. We're on the heels of drought. Now we're going to be on the heels of flooding here very shortly. This community needs resource. It needs rebuilding. It needs help from the federal government. And I'll work any way I can to get that here for you. So excited that there'll be quite a contingent of you coming out in May. And I'll be looking forward to help host you there. And as your congressman, it's the only county I've got all of is Merced. So if Merced County's coming in, I'm the guy. And I'll look forward to that. If there's a couple questions, I'd be happy to answer questions rather than kind of go on blindly here.
Yeah. Questions for Congressman Duarte?
I have a comment, not a question.
Go ahead.
Congressman, I just appreciate you coming here. Your accessibility has been unbelievable. That's very appreciated, especially in our time of need. And I want to thank you for getting on the right committees. Every one of those are exactly what we need for this county, so much appreciated. And appreciate your hard work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Director Espinosa.
Congressman, I want to appreciate for you coming to my district, back in January, and also Sam has always been grateful at, whatever needs, tells me, hey, call me anytime. He's always accessible. And so it helps, when you can communicate back and forth anytime. So I appreciate everything you do for us and all the stuff that you deliver to Planeta. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I should introduce Sam Sammer, my district director here. He's here, and we're still moving our field reps around. Christian Santos is going to be your field rep starting April 1st. He worked on my campaign some, and he's just a ton of energy. I think you'll really enjoy him, and I'm very proud to have him on the team. But yeah, we're here to serve Merced.
He's not related to your colleague out of New York, is he?
No.
Mayor,
Yeah, they're super.
Good, Sky.
thank you, Congressman, for being here. Again, Sam, thank you for just making himself available. I know there's a lot going on and you need help with that, and I think Sam's a great guy for that. So Sam, thank you. And then I know that it was already mentioned to you, but I just want to go on record as saying, as a member of the Arts Board, we did submit a project to you, and that's for 6 buses, and we're perfectly fine. We'd love to get all 6, but it's scalable. You know, these buses are about $950,000 a piece, and so any help that we can get on that, it would be much appreciated. And I'll share with you, as you become more familiar with the arts, it really was a local solution to a federal problem. It's a 5-county JPA that is providing transportation into Yosemite National Park and trying to help them with one of their biggest challenges, which is getting vehicles out of the park. And so any help that we can get there would be much appreciated. But thank you for being here, sir.
Happy to do it, and I'll go to bat on that. I fully understand the local solution to a federal problem is very clear and very, very logical to me.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Director Pedroza.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and then also thank you to Sam and your staff. I was able to help with some food drive stuff that your office had put together, so through the United Methodist Church. So I was very happy to do that, and then with your guys' participation in regards to the emergency response and that type of stuff. Sam was on the calls every time, all the time, really providing the perspective, and didn't say much because I think that if we needed him to, I think he was listening a lot and giving you the information as he was as he saw fit. So thank you very much, Sam. I really appreciate it. And then thank you for bringing that up. I think the creeks are something that we're not really doing enough to clean them out. And I think it's adding to the problem that we just faced. And so I would much rather take that proactive approach and then reactive so that we're not in this position again. So thank you for doing that. And then also thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Director Pereira.
So thanks for being here and really, getting up to speed quick. I mean, hearing you talk is just amazing how, I would be just totally overwhelmed. And so you're the man for the job. Just one quick question. What's been the biggest learning curve for you, or what have you kind of enjoyed learning about the most, or just a little insight to your world in DC?
Oh, that's a good question. How much you really have to tear into stuff. I mean, I'm looking at the budget numbers coming out. I'm looking at the Silicon Valley Bank foreclosure, and I was a finance undergrad in MBA, so I kind of take special interest in some of these business matters. And there is a lot behind the narrative on every one of these things. There is, when you dig deeper, like the Silicon Valley Bank, I am still not convinced they didn't have adequate bank capital to see through a liquidity crisis. And what we did was hurt the dollar and inflated Bitcoin in our actions. The cryptocurrencies went up in value as we foreclosed on a bank, which I think had above the regulatory minimum capital, even after all the long-term securities were sold off and losses taken. And there were substantial losses taken, and there were substantial mistakes. But that's just an example of basically there's always more to learn. And so that's why I will pick up my phone and I will hear from you guys, because I know even back there in the big fancy building, the Capitol building, there's a lot that's just pure narrative and not really sorted out. I mean, the budget crunch, I think there's some sensible solutions to that are being glossed over by both parties. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate it, and it's good to be here. You know how to get a hold of us.
I think we had one more. I think.
Oh, yeah, sir. I'm sorry.
Nelson he needs his chance with you.
Well, I don't need my chance, but I do appreciate your comment about helping Merced County. As the mayor of Atwater and as everybody else up here probably has the same sentiment, California is a donor state, and we never seem to get back the help we need here in the Central Valley. My job as the mayor is to get back to Atwater as much state and federal funds as we possibly can to help our communities after we've donated so much to the rest of this nation. And I think everybody up here would probably agree with that.
And in the appropriations, I will fight anywhere I can to get, instead of state block grants, I don't think when things go to California that the rural counties that I represent really get their share. So anytime you have ideas as to how to get state block grants turned into county grants, more like we did with COVID relief, where the cities and counties get it directly, I'm all ears for that. I don't trust that Sacramento's going to give us the fair shake we deserve.
All right. Anybody else?
If I could, just
Stacey.
very quickly, thank you again. I have to say, when we made the request, I think we did it, and we were just really pleased when we heard that you were willing to come and meet with us. So thank you. I don't know that we've had a congressman visit us at a board meeting, at least in the 8 years I've been here. So thank you for doing that. And also, I want to just reiterate very respectfully, I think I agree with what your comment is. Some of the problems we're having, there's so much funding out there, and there's a real struggle about bringing that federal funding down into our communities in the Central Valley. There's a whole nother conversation we can have about that, but sometimes when those funds go to the state, then they are fettered through the state lens and state priorities, and it isn't always the easiest to draw them down into some of our needs here, particularly on the transportation side, where we have things like needing to finish widening 99 and others. We do, although I want to say, have an excellent relationship with our District 10 out of Caltrans. They're excellent partners of ours, but I think you hit the nail on the head. So you'll hear more from us on that in May for sure.
Let's have a sit down.
Absolutely.
Down here to meet with your Caltrans folks, find out where the money is, find out where the problems are.
Great.
And what we can do.
Excellent.
Here to do.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here, and
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks again. Excited for a lot of good work ahead. Takes us to item 8, the Citizens Advisory Committee report.
Maddie is here.
And Maddie Brown.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
No funding to offer as a student representative, but I can give you a report. All action items that were presented last Friday, March 3rd, we passed as presented by staff, and there were a couple items that generated comment. The first of which is the contract, the potential contract with Stantec for the zero emission buses. And one of the committee's concerns there was the condensed timeline. But through discussion with staff, we came to understand that certain tasks can be prioritized to meet the CARB's deadline for submitting our plan. And then we had discussion on the regional housing updates. For the fiscal year 23-24 budget, we were able to see that at a line item level. There were some questions about proposed cuts, but as you all know, hard to get blood from a turnip. And then last but not least, there was not a report from the Air Pollution Control District, and Paul announced that he will be leaving the CAC role after about 6 years, I believe, of service. So we are very grateful for Paul Ward participating, and he received formal recognition in the meeting. So we wish him well.
All right. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? Anybody? All right. Takes us to 9, the Caltrans report. And do we have either Marlon or Dennis or somebody else available?
We do have Marlon online. Marlon, we have promoted you to panelist, but you do have to accept it on your end. Here he comes.
All right. Good afternoon, Marlon.
I am here. This is Marlon District 10 Deputy for Planning, Local Assistance, and Environmental. Hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Chair, Madam Director. I appreciate the time. I'll just give a couple of updates. I have a few updates from the Caltrans side of things lately. And I'll start off with our state of emergency that has been noted from the state government. Our governor has issued a state of emergency, and also our federal government has issued a state of emergency as well for California. And this is, of course, in response to the latest storms this month, last month, and even into late January. So it's definitely the first thing on our mind for Caltrans right now. We have a little bit of a break right now in the weather, but we know there's been a lot of impacts this week and last week, and we do expect another system coming in very shortly. So this is something our maintenance team is very much in progress in responding to many areas within the district that are inundated right now, and there's obviously a lot of work with that. So please do bear with us. Our maintenance team is stretched pretty thin right now, but we are very cognizant of the closures right now in Merced County, in particular State Route 59 south of Merced. You know, we're very disappointed with that on the district side, and we're doing whatever we can to make sure that we have not only a short-term solution, but also a long-term solution to the flooding issue. It's very much on our director's mind, Dennis Agar, and he wanted to convey that concern on our end to the board today. You know, it's very much something that we're trying to address. So I want to make sure that the board is aware of that. And to that point as well, we do have a project at Mariposa Creek Bridge that we are moving forward with. We're trying to add scope to that project, and in particular, our culverts. We would like to add culvert facilities as part of that project, but we do understand right now the bridge is the main focus of that project. So we're working on that aspect in the short term. But in the long term, we are developing an adaptation strategy proposal that we're going to get hopefully headquarters blessing on. That's something I've asked my team to work on and submit that as soon as possible. So I'm looking for some positive news on that, but I did want to let the board know that that is a major concern for us, and we are continuing to address that as much as we possibly can. And we do appreciate the partnership with MCAG and the county as well, and we'll continue to work together and partner on how we can work together best to make improvements, especially with all the climate stressor that's really important for us right now, and that's flooding. So appreciate the thoughts and concern, and we'll continue our coordination. I do want to mention some positive things though as well in our update. We did receive word that the Highway Safety Improvement Program did award some funding for Merced, and we're very happy that that's a state program. Oh, it's a federal program, sorry. There's $225 million statewide that is awarded. Merced County, or I should say MCAG, we received $1.4 million roughly, and this is for a traffic signage improvement project south of State Route 140. So I'm very happy that that funding has been allotted to that project, and looking forward to see that move forward as well. So it's a great thing, and we're very happy about that. Moving forward, the things I want to mention, we do have our couple of guidelines out and plans out, one of them being the California State Rail Plan is now out as a final draft out for public review. Obviously, it contains a lot of the rail plans that we have planned for in the next 20 years. The plan actually goes about 40 years out. So it's a long-range planning document. I encourage everyone to take a look at it if you have the chance. It is on our state website, but if you need a link, I'm happy to share that with the board accordingly. In addition, we do have our Reconnecting Communities Highway to Boulevard guidelines that are also out for public review. This is a 60-day review, and I believe the final date is May 15th, I want to say, for that document. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those as well regarding the Reconnecting Communities, but that's also available for public comment. And again, I want to mention that's a state program that is rolled out of the federal Reconnecting Communities program as well. So just want to share that. And also, I want to give a last plug for our Clean California Community Day celebration. Tomorrow we are starting our Clean California Community Days from March 17th to March 27th. We'll have a range of events. Our big event is again on March 25th That's a Saturday at San Joaquin Delta College. But we do have a website for that, cleancalifornia.dot.ca.gov. I'm happy to share any additional information with the board on that as well. But again, that's just to make sure and encourage everyone to keep our highways clean and keep California clean. That's really what it's all about. Be prideful in our state and our transportation facilities. And we are using social media hashtags to promote that as well. Hashtag Clean California or Clean CA. Moving on, I do also want to mention we do have our Map app that we are promoting for real-time traffic information. Obviously, it has all of our closures on there. Many of our mountain passes are still closed at this moment. So if you like real-time traffic conditions, please do check out the app. It is also on our website, quickmap.dot.ca.gov as well. The last thing I want to mention is there are a couple of actions that came out of, I believe it was last month's meeting. I know Supervisor Pereira, you've mentioned State Route 140 at V Street, I believe. I think that's one that you mentioned. We did reach out to the city regarding that project. We have not received response yet, but we're looking to coordinate with them to discuss that and how we can make that intersection better, because we have taken a look at that issue as well. Oh gosh, the other one just left my brain. But I will conclude my updates right there. I'm happy to take any questions, comments, concerns. Actually, before I remembered now, the signage for LeGrand, that was the other one that I wanted to mention. And thank you, Supervisor Pedroso, for concurring, but we have not received final concurrence from the county, still waiting on that. So that's pretty much the last step there. So hopefully we receive some feedback from the county on that. That concludes my Caltrans update. Happy to take any questions, thoughts. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Marlon. Thank you for your update. Any questions? Director Silvera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marlon, thank you for bringing up Highway 59 in Mariposa Creek, because I was going to bring it up. But I guess the follow-up question is as you and Director Agar are trying to push this process along faster, if there is such a thing in Caltrans, like, what can I do to help? Like, is this something that maybe I should be reaching out to? I was actually on a call with one of the CTC members is on a board that I'm on, and I've thought about bringing it up there. I don't know, because it's something other than potholes. It's the biggest thing that I get called about by my constituents that are coming to Merced, that need to come to Merced. I get phone calls pretty much on a daily basis asking me, is 59 open? Is Sandy Mush open? Because that's the designated, well, it's not a designated route, because you guys have, I would really appreciate if Caltrans would designate a detour route, so then we could kind of help, hopefully hold you guys a little bit responsible for the damage that's happening to our local roads, since they're having to get off of your highway and onto our local roads. That was what I was kind of told, that Caltrans used to designate a detour route, and now they just close it and don't designate a detour route, and so then there's no responsibility there for anything that happens. So I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is hearsay, but that's something that I would like you to look into if you could. And again, what can I do? What can I know that my colleague from District 1 would be advocating right beside me on anything that we could do to try to help speed that process along. And then the last thing that I'll share with you is, I know that our crews, your crews, are super swamped with everything going on, but Highway 152 through the city of Los Manis is probably in the worst shape that I can ever remember it being in. It is deteriorating quickly. So I just want to put that on your radar for some of the maintenance crews to take a look at. Thank you, Marlon.
Yeah, thank you, Director Silvera. To your points, and I really appreciate the offer for support in any way that you can provide, and we'll definitely make sure to include you if we need additional support. Right now, we're going to submit our proposal for the additional scope of the project, and hopefully we can get that expedited approval. So we're going to work internally to try and get that moving forward, as well as the long-range adaptation planning proposal. That's actually part of the PROTECT program, the federal PROTECT program. And I'll say, if we don't receive positive feedback from headquarters, then maybe we can ask for your support in that regard. But we're going to take the steps in-house to see what we can do and get approval. If we don't, then that's a different story, and then we can have an additional conversation. So I appreciate the support. To your question regarding the detour signs, you know, I remember, I think last board meeting, there was a comment regarding the detours, and I did reach out to our maintenance team, and they explained to me that there was detour signage posted at several locations around the county, especially around 59 and 152, but
there's not a question, Marlon.
You're not seeing those detours, so I have to follow up back with our maintenance team and see where, in fact, that they posted that, and if they need to increase the posting of those detours.
Marlon, I don't think that it's a question of there is detour signs out there. It's just that Caltrans doesn't have a designated detour route, so it's basically closed off at Sandy Mush and Highway 59. You can go left or you can go right. If you go left or you go right, you can find a way around it. But without that designated detour route designation, I'm going to call it, it is, you know, we've got people that are going down roads that they're not familiar with, people getting stuck, and not to mention you're taking highway traffic and pushing it onto local county roads that were never designed to handle that kind of traffic. And oh, by the way, at the worst time that you want that kind of traffic, when we've had the abundance of rain.
I understood, Director. You know, I definitely will reach out to our maintenance team to see if they can designate a particular route that makes sense with the county. I think that's a valid suggestion, and I'm going to pose that to our maintenance team and see what comes out of that. So I'll definitely follow up with the board on that request. And then on State Route 152, I think there was a previous action item for some potholes in the road there, and I did also ask our maintenance team to address that, and they informed me that they had. But if this is an addition, or if it's in a different location than previous, or I would like to know the particular locations of the potholes on 152. So you can reach out to me on the side if you'd like. But yeah, I'd like some details on that, because I'd like our maintenance team to address that as well.
It's pretty much, Marlon, it's start at one end of town at the city limits and go through the other end of town, either direction. It just, the road is really starting to deteriorate. It isn't one big pothole. It's just there's a bunch of settling where they've come in and did the dig outs and replaced, you know, a tires with or whatever you want to call it. It's just, it's all settling with all this moisture, and it's really rough, and I just have never seen it that bad before. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will definitely have our maintenance team address that.
Director Espinosa.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Marlon, thank you for updating us on 59 and the bridge, and as well as Director Silvera. You know, we're here, we're 1-2 punch here. You know, people are frustrated because, you know, it's been almost a month it's been closed. So, you know, like I say, whether it's Healy or Greer Road is, you know, as a better detour. I had to take a detour myself and went around Healy and got some big potholes. And, you know, thankfully I was able to call Dana Public Works and to address those because, you know, I came up on them pretty fast. So, yeah, Sandy Mush through Healy or Greer Road is probably a good possibility. Also, northbound 99 on the, I know you sent me an email regarding the Planada sign off the freeway. I couldn't find it, so I don't know. You know, I know I saw it. Couldn't remember exactly where it was, but it might have been south of Mission Boulevard, going northbound. Somebody broke it, and I don't know where it's at. So, but I know if you do the research in your department, I know that it took us 3 years to put it up, and with Mr. John Chavez from Planada, you know, advocating for it as well. So hopefully, if you do the research, you probably know exactly where it goes. So, in your department, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. That's helpful detail. We'll definitely take a look back at that.
Director Yanes.
Yeah, Marlon, thank you for the information. Just to kind of echo what Director Silvera is talking about, there were some really bad potholes in Los Banos at 152 and 165, and Caltrans did address those, so thank you for that. And I think that might be what you're talking about. But yeah, what we're seeing now is specifically through the middle of town, the numbered streets, 6th, 7th Street, all the way through West I. It is really bad. And then the second question I have, and again, I'm just kind of for my own curiosity, how much does Caltrans play a role with as far as the way we as citizens track traffic on our phones? And I'll give you an example. I was coming to Merced today. I knew not to take 59. I got on my phone. I clicked Apple Maps and it said, hey, take Turner Island to Sandy Mush to 59. I'm like, nope, that ain't going to happen. How much does Caltrans at all, does your app actually kind of convey that or anything on that?
Great question. You know, I always say that Waze pulls the data from Quick Map, that's for sure, and Google Maps does the same. But Apple Maps in particular, I'm not quite sure. So that's a great question. I don't have the answer for you, but I know for sure Waze and Google Maps, they get their details on real-time traffic from Quick Map. So if at all possible, I would recommend Waze or Google Maps if you're not using Quick Map. Apple Maps, I'm not quite sure, but I will get a response back on that. So let me look into that and I'll follow up.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
All right, Director Moran.
Hi, thank you for the report. I just had as I drive every day through 99, through Merced and Atwater, actually yesterday, again, I saw one of those big rigs hit one of the mini bridges on 99, and I'm just wondering, once they're done with the process of expanding the freeway, is there further work to be done, expected to be done at the bridges to see what about the damage or if it's going to affect it in the future, or is there any plans on that or any updates, information?
Are you specifically wondering about in Atwater?
Merced.
Oh, sorry, Merced. Okay, yeah. So, you know, in terms of the project that we have going on, once it's completed, it's completed. But what we do is we routinely check the bridges on our state highway system for structural feasibility, if it is actually safe to drive on, safe to traverse. We do that on a periodic nature throughout the year. I don't know how often, but we do it periodically. And if there's a certain bridge that is of concern based on some sort of impact to it, we can expedite our structural review of the bridge. So I can mention this to our team and they can go out and take a look. But I would, if possible, like some details on the particular bridge that you are concerned about. We'd be happy to go out and take a look as soon as we can.
I think they're all have been impacted all along that Merced stretch. They all, I mean, there's not one specific, I mean, probably just, and then there's no way for anybody to stop and kind of, you know, because it's just, there's not enough room. But I'm just wondering if you just drive through and just look at the bridges, everyone has been hit. And then I know for sure there's one, and I don't know which one, but the rear axle of a big truck was just pulled from the truck, and that's how hard it hit the bridge. So I don't know, you know, I'm just wondering, because if you drive through it, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, if it's within the project area, and thank you, I appreciate the feedback. I will ask our project team to look at it, those bridges within the project area, and see, just to make sure that they're structurally safe. Safety is our most important concern. So we'll definitely expedite our review of the bridges within the project area right now. So appreciate that.
All right, Director Espinosa again.
Marlon, just to add on the public traffic safety, when I go on with my regular Honda car going northbound on the number 2 lane or the inside lane, it's very dangerous. And then when you, especially at night, it's hard to see those bridges, those corners. The curves are very tight, and the oncoming traffic lights are very, that's what causes the all the accidents, because it's there's no barriers, higher barriers in the barricades to prevent that. So the oncoming traffic lights are really glaring, and that's what makes it dangerous. So I've addressed it to the CHP as well in the past, but that's going to create more accidents as if Caltrans doesn't elevate those. At least I know that in other projects in the past I've seen put them boards on top of those cement barriers, but not here. So I don't know. It's just going to cause more accidents. Unfortunately, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor. I share your concern and your discomfort in driving through that area. It's not the easiest thing. It really isn't. But I appreciate the suggestion, and I do agree with you. We have put those up in different areas across the state. I don't know if our project team has considered that, but I will propose that to them based on your request. So thank you for mentioning that.
All right, anyone else?
My last comment, Marlon, I'm glad to see you're back in your nice fancy office.
Well, yeah, I couldn't be there in person today, but I figured this would be second best. So thank you, Supervisor.
All right. Thanks as always, Marlon. We appreciate you, and obviously we all sympathize with and understand the challenges, especially of road maintenance during the past few months. So thank you for your work, and thank you for the work of your agency. And we'll see you next month.
Mr. Chair.
All right, takes item 10, informational items. Any informational items that anyone on the board would wish to have pulled for separate discussion or for informational purposes? Okay, seeing none, no action necessary there. It takes us to item 11, which is consent. Any items on the consent agenda that any members of the board would like to have pulled for separate consideration or discussion? All right, seeing none, is there a motion with respect to the consent agenda?
Chair Silvera, motion to approve.
Okay, motion for Director Silvera, second. Second from Director Yanez. Is anyone opposed? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. Takes us now to item 16, which has been moved up. 16 is the landfill tipping fee rate increase discussion. And James, we turn it back over to you, sir.
Good afternoon again.
Afternoon.
So we had our discussion earlier during the workshop. In the staff report that you have as part of your regular agenda item, we are asking for some direction on really two factors. One, whether we maintain the current geographic status quo in the tipping fee or go to a normalized rate, which would eventually take each jurisdiction to the same rate. Once that decision is put forward to us, then the second half of that is whether that rate increase will be effective July 1st of this year or July 1st of next year. And based on the guidance you give us today, we will come back next month with an actual action item to implement those decisions.
All right. Any questions for James? Is there anybody from the public who wish to be heard on this items? Okay, seeing none, we'll take input. We'll take questions and then begin the discussion. All right, any questions? Director Silvera.
Yeah, James, thank you. I know James informed me earlier that he was in Washington, D.C. at 5 a.m. this morning. So he's been on a plane from Sacramento back to Merced and then gets to drive home to Ripon tonight. So I appreciate your loyalty to the cause here. So just as a refresher for everyone, and myself included, these rate increases, if we set forth direction today, it's going to come back to us in April. There's nothing that precludes us from looking at these rates on an annual basis. And, like, for example, there's an item that's coming up later in the agenda where, because of the misfortune of the Oak Fire, our landfills received $3 million in additional revenue that we weren't anticipating because a lot of that debris came down to our landfill. You know, we're just going through these floods. There's a tremendous amount of debris removal that is going to end up in our landfills that we weren't anticipating. And so by passing something next month, giving direction to pass something next month, as we, when those revenues that potentially come or don't come, we have an option to come back and look at these. These are just up to increase amounts, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and that's, you know, mentioned at the workshop last month, you know, it was really rather surprising that it had been 12 years since the last rate increase. And, you know, through whatever factors were going on, the revenue stream looked okay, the reserves looked good. So, you know, a couple of years ago, your board did ask the authority to do this tip fee study. And as we've gone through it, you know, we see now the value of the tool. We'll be able to make adjustments as we go year to year. And we'll certainly probably have this discussion every year. Rather, I promise you it will not be 12 years before we talk about this again.
Perfect. And then I guess the next thing that a comment that I want to make is, you know, as we discussed a little bit in the workshop I did is, you know, we get to the point, and I believe it's 27, 28, when that's what this board has agreed to as far as importing trash into our landfills, and that is specifically because of bond payments. And I want us to be in the position to where we get to make a choice, you know, with importation. We do it because we want to do it and not because we have to do it. So for me, I think that nobody likes to pass increases on, but I think that putting ourselves in a position to then we get to make a decision. And what does that mean? Doing it because we want to, not because we have to. That means that currently we bring in imports at a discounted rate. They're paying a lower fee to bring those imports in because we need to have that baseline of revenue to be able to pay our bonds back. When we get into a position that we don't need that import trash, then we can put the rate out there that says you're not paying cheaper than what our residents are paying. That maybe you're even paying a premium. And if somebody needs the service bad enough, they're going to pay it. And if they don't, then they're not. But either way, I feel like we're in a better position. We're not, the residents of Merced County aren't subsidizing another county's landfill needs. So those are all things that I take into consideration into coming up with this decision. Again, I wasn't here when the decisions were made to change the rates based upon geographic locations. I think that the fairest way is that we all end up at the same rate. And so I will, at this point, because I didn't want to give direction in the previous meeting because it was just a workshop, I'm in favor of the route that we go, that over the course of 9 years, the rates, everybody's rates come to be the same rates, but with it starting it in fiscal year 24-25 instead of 23-24. And I know a lot of you were here, but some of you weren't. And the reason, my thought process behind that is that we agree to give direction today. It goes on an April agenda, a meeting in April, knowing with 218 processes that I don't think any one jurisdiction has the capability of doing those solely on their own. There's consultants that have to be involved to do that, and I think that puts people at a disadvantage to try to get a 218 process done in just a matter, you know, July 1st will be here before we know it. So for those reasons, I'm at this point, the starting in 24-25 with the rate increases and having those rates all come to end up at the same rate by 2032-33 is the model that I would prefer, and I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Additional comments, thoughts?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi.
Good afternoon.
Dos Palace is going through a 218 process already for our water rates. So I agree with Director Silvera, and maybe we can start this next year so we can not have two of those going on at the same time. We're already going to increase our water rates by double, and it's going to be a big hit for everyone. So, and we already had an increase in our garbage rates. So it will drastically affect our community if we raise the rates again this year. So, plus it would confuse everyone. I'm just saying. But anyway, that's my thought.
All right. Who's next? Director Pereira.
I guess this is probably a Stacy question. Is it possible for us to gather the delivery rates for our April meeting?
The hauling rates that each jurisdiction is currently paying?
Or will pay, because they're all changing right now, either way.
It would be dependent on, it would be incumbent upon you all to the jurisdictions to release it. I don't know that we would have it for Atwater or Livingston, or because they haven't gone out yet. I'm looking. I've Kyle and Philip in particular, and James. I've not read a hauling contract. So is this something that if the jurisdictions were to provide their hauling agreements to us, that information would be available, or how would that work?
Yeah, we can. There are some of the rates I've looked. There are some rates that I can find online. Other rates I would have to contact the cities or the jurisdictions directly and ask them what their rates are. Some are tied into their utility bills, and so they'd have to let me know what those rates are for solid waste specifically. And we can get that information for you. Now, those solid waste rates, there's a solid waste rate, there's a recycling rate, there's a green waste rate, and so the rate that they're paying at the landfill is spread across those different costs. So we can let you know what each one is individually, but those contracts are negotiated by the jurisdictions, and how our rate affects the rate that the residents are paying is in a direct line, because each hauler has a different setup of how those rates are, how they disperse those rates. So some have different rates that they're paying their staff, their fuel, their processing may be different if they're taking it to us, or in case of Jilton is taking to their facility. And so there's just different ways for them to decide how that impacts their cost to their residents. Some of it is based off their profit decisions. Some may be willing to take a higher or lower profit, and so those are things that are negotiated with the jurisdictions on how that affects the hauler.
So what we could do is ask the jurisdiction, saying that what to get to the heart of the question is, we would be going to your city managers and to your county CEO and say, we're trying to identify the cost, the rate you pay for the hauling of your municipal solid waste, and we'll bring that information, recognizing it's not going to be apples to apples, but it'll give some idea of what they're paying. Is that fair?
For putting together that list, are you looking just for the residential costs, or are you also looking for the costs that the commercials pay? Because there are multiple, depending on the size of the commercial bin, how that could be affected. So again, the hauler may put that fee into the residential, or they may recoup it through the commercial costs of their hauling. So that can affect it as well. So let me know which rates you're looking for, and we can put together a list for you.
Yeah, I'm just, my concern is that we're going to have constituents paying far different rates to have their trash hauled to the landfill, right? It's easy to sit here and say $50 a ton for everybody is fair, right? But is it really? And that's all and if the jurisdictions don't want to provide it, I'm good, right? I'm just trying to give an avenue for us to be able to try to figure out if there's a way to figure out what each person's pay, what the constituents are paying.
I can gather that information.
It's not your, it's not your load to bear. It's the jurisdictions. I'm just asking if we could ask that. And
yeah, and I just want to clarify. Yeah, you're particularly concerned about the hauling cost, right?
Well, yeah.
It may not be apples to apples as we look at the different contracts, and it may not be exactly clear where that cost is being, I don't want to say hidden, but it is kind of built into other variables.
So, but yes, so you're looking for the residential or both the residential and the commercial rates? What would you like to see?
I don't know if I want to make too much work. You know, I mean,
Well, I got
get a sense for what it's like
Okay.
is what I'm really trying to
Sure.
do. Right?
Okay. I'll put together a list for April.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Director Espinosa.
Well, I'm just going to make a motion again for whether it's geographic status quo and, you know, whether it's 23, 24 or 24, 25. But I'd rather go with the status quo. Like I said, it's just going to be harder on a lot of people. It's better to implement it. And I know that the haulers want to know exactly, you know, they don't want to wait a year to see what we're going to decide. So it's just, they'd rather implement it and, you know, and implement into their contracts with different municipalities. So I'm going to go with that. Thank you.
Director Yanes.
Yeah, just, you know, and we heard earlier in the tip fee workshop, as far as the geographic status quo is, we don't know how we got there, right? I think that's kind of the overwhelming sense, is that however we got there, it's there, but when we have to explain to our constituents and anybody, is they're going to ask, well, how did you come up with that number? And we don't have an answer. So, and I think the end game is to normalize everything, and however that looks, that's kind of the path moving forward. Because to me, it's much easier to explain to people, well, what is my bill and how did you arrive at that bill? To me, it's easier to explain to people that rather than I don't know, but we're going to go in that same direction. So that's kind of, I'm leading again toward the normalizing, and again, something that hasn't been adjusted for 12 years, you know, and then now we turn into a quick rush to do the 218 process in like a 90-day or 100-day span. I don't think that's fair. So that's kind of just my take on it.
All right. More thoughts, comments, questions? Okay. So two, not sure if it quite makes sense to two-step it or divide it, but you have one. Do we start with the rate increases July 1 of 23 or July 1 of 24 for the upcoming, for the 23-24 fiscal year, the 24-25 fiscal year? That's one question. And then obviously the geographic normalization or geographic status quo, I apologize, or the normalization is the other issue. Mm-hmm. Seem to me to be two somewhat separate issues, but does anybody have, just taking them one by one, the date of the rate increase, does anybody have, in addition to what's been said already, any strong feelings one way or another, thoughts about the date of the rate increase? Director Pedroza?
I think I agree with what's been said already in regards to the 24-25, but I also like Paul's argument in the sense that we don't know where that geographic thing came from. So I'm leaning towards the normalizing the rates at 24-25. I think that just makes more sense right now.
All right, so you're normalizing in 24 would be the...
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want to take them as separate motions. I would make a motion that we get the, is it giving direction? Do you need a motion? That would be.
Yeah, I think we could, I mean, we could take them separate, or I'm not sure if there's, we're not quite there yet to see whether or not that's the right course or not. We could take them separate, or we could take them together.
Yeah, essentially the request is to give us direction on what the action will be next month. So if you say, if it turns out that it's normalizing starting July 1 of 2024, then the action item next month will say, that we're asking to approve this rate increase to start at this time, and this is what the rates are going to be. So basically telling us what the action item will be next month.
And so I guess then my next question is, like,
how do you?
Are you gonna just take the pulse? So you're gonna read the pulse of the board on that, or would you like it in an action? Because I'd be willing to.
We're gonna need a motion.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion that we get the first question answered. That we, at least in my opinion, that we should start in fiscal year 24-25. And that would be my motion.
Do you want to do just a request to do them both? You said normalize. Obviously, you've expressed clear support for normalizing. Maybe at this point, take them both together, or?
I guess in the interest of letting everybody have their opinion, if I'm just reading kind of comments, I think that there some folks that might be okay with starting in 24-25 might not be okay with normalizing, and so given I think that we can probably get consensus around starting in 24-25, and let's get that off the table, and then we could have the next discussion.
Okay.
So again, that would be my motion.
And there's a second from Director Pedroza. Roll call vote, Mayor Michael. This is for starting with the rate increases fiscal year 24-25, so starting July 1 of 24.
And the motion was by Director Silvera and seconded by Pedroso, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Director Espinoza?
No.
Director Hogue?
Whether you started 23, 24, or 24, 25.
This is for 24, 25.
The motion is
Yeah.
to begin the rate increase in fiscal year 20, okay?
Yes, I'm voting yes.
Yeah. This is for the later start.
Yep.
Yes, later start.
Director Yanez?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
Yes.
Director Moran?
Yes.
Director Nagy? Director Nelson?
Yes.
Director Pereira?
Aye.
Director Silvera? Director Pedroso?
Yes.
Chair Serrato?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Takes us to the other issue, which is geographic status quo versus normalization. All right. Thoughts, additional thoughts? Been some discussion obviously already. Additional thoughts, comments, discussion, or a motion?
So Dos Palace is going
I'll make a motion to normalize. Is that what we're doing? Yeah, normalize the rates.
Motion from Director Pedroso to normalize the rates. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Director Yanez. And Mary Michael. Any additional, if I could pause for a second. I reached out earlier. I asked early on.
Yeah, okay, good.
Oh, I see. I don't know this one.
Okay.
Okay. Mary Michael.
Thank you. Director Espinoza?
No.
Director Hogue?
Yes or no? I'm confused. I'm yes, I'm a yes.
Director Yanez?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
Yes.
Director Moran?
Abstain.
Director Nagy?
Yes.
Director Nelson?
No.
Director Pereira?
No.
Director Silvera?
Aye.
Director Pedroso?
Yes.
Chair Serrato?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Looks like 7, 3, and 1. 7 ayes, 3 no, and 1 abstain. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for an efficient discussion there. Appreciate the time. James, thank you for all your work in this.
Thank you.
Consultants as well. Kyle, everybody, thank you for all your work. And thanks for getting us through this. We appreciate it. Look forward to a bright future for the landfill.
Thank you very much, and we'll have that action item next month.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You should leave now and go home and get some rest.
Yes.
What kind of, you fly the Concorde or something from DC this morning? Take that back? F-15? Oh, geez. All right, takes us back to item 12, which are our MCAG action items. 12A, Meg, I see you're already ready to go. Our REAP 2.0 draft scoring criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, directors. This is an action item regarding our draft scoring criteria for 2 new grant programs that MCAG is proposing utilizing our Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program of 2021, or REAP 2.0 funding. So I have several slides that I'm going to share, and all the information in the slides is pulled from the staff report on page 244 or 246. Next slide, please. So we've talked about REAP 2.0 quite a bit over the last 6 months, but just as a little bit of a refresher, REAP 2.0 is a state program allocating funding to metropolitan planning organizations with 3 main program objectives listed on the slides. So it's to accelerate infill development, affirmatively further fair housing, and to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And next slide. MCG submitted our grant application to the state in December for our formula allocation of about $3.6 million. based on the program framework that the governing board approved in December. And that framework included 2 grant programs outlined on the slide. So the first is a larger regional competitive grant program aimed at funding projects and implementation. So that's approximately $2.7 million. And then the smaller local suballocation grant program, which funding pot is about $900,000. And that would mainly just be for planning funding, suballocated to local jurisdictions. The state's currently reviewing our grant application. And while the deadline for the grant application was December 31st, there's a separate deadline for the state to approve any suballocation criteria or scoring criteria that we're proposing with these grant programs. Next slide. And just a little bit of background on the draft scoring criteria that we're proposing. This is in line with essentially the only set of scoring criteria that the state has approved as of right now, and that was originally developed by the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, or SBCAG. Several other MPOs are utilizing the same set of criteria for their regional programs. It's closely aligned with the state's guidelines, so we're hopeful that the state would approve our scoring criteria later this month, and then we would go on to develop the rest of the program guidelines, and then hopefully issue a call for applications later this summer. So on the slide here is just a summary of the criteria with the proposed weights, and this is for the competitive, the larger pot of funding. So the criteria is heavily weighted, 75% towards meeting the state's 3 objectives, and then a maximum of 20 points for some other primary factors, which are all defined in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on those. And then 5 points for the scope of work and budget, just essentially to ensure that applications are thorough and that projects being proposed would be deliverable. And next slide, please. And then for the local suballocation grant program, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Go back to the last slide. Can we change it? Can we change those numbers?
The governing board does have discretion to do that, yes.
I would say that we change, we do reducing VMT at 23 and affirmatively furthering fair housing at 25.
All right. We're not quite there yet, but we'll get, I think, that's why we're here, to adjust the scoring, but.
Okay. Well, I'm just putting that out there so you're thinking about it, that I don't want to see
let her finish the
reducing
presentation.
VMT higher than that, where I'd rather see it at the bottom.
Okay.
Great. And then for the local suballocation grant program, which allocates funding by formula to local jurisdictions, would use the same set of criteria, but this is essentially over-the-counter funding for jurisdictions, so we would evaluate those applications just on a pass-fail basis. And those projects, or the planning funding for this program, we anticipate being things like rezoning to address your RENA from your housing element update, infrastructure planning to support infill housing, that sort of thing. And next slide, please. So as part of our scoring criteria, we also included a proposed suballocation formula for that planning funding, that $900,000 pot. So after discussions with local jurisdictions and through our REAP work group, we came up with a base allocation of $100,000 per jurisdiction, and then an additional portion of that funding based on your share of the 6-cycle RENA. Next slide, please. And then this is just a tentative timeline, and it's tentative because the state still has not approved our application. So depending on when it is approved and we're able to receive those funds, then we would be able to issue the call for applications. The applications would be due late summer or in the fall. Hopefully we would be able to award and execute agreements late this year. And then the big deadline is June 30th, 2026. All funds have to be expended. So that's kind of a tight timeline for construction projects, but that's what's in the legislation. And just in closing, this was kind of a high-level overview of the scoring criteria, so I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions on altering the criteria or the weightings. But this is an action item, so MCAG and TRB recommend the governing board approve the draft REAP 2.0 scoring criteria to be submitted to the state California Department of Housing and Community Development for review and approval. Thank you.
And anybody from the public wish to give any input? Looking like no. I guess back to us. Any thoughts? The one thing we're here for is to adopt the scoring criteria. Okay, so the one decision before us tonight or this afternoon is for the adoption of the scoring criteria. Want to go back to that slide? All right. Any discussion on this? Thoughts, comments? Director Silvera, you had some?
I did. I'm of the belief that reducing vehicle miles traveled makes a lot of sense in urban areas, metropolitan areas. When you live in rural areas, everything if you live in Los Banos, there's a certain level of services that are offered there, but just county services. You got to travel across the county to come be able to go get a birth certificate or a copy of your marriage certificate or a death certificate. And I feel like it's great in theory, it might work in those places, and having that, if it was up to me, not trying to change your whole system there, I would even reduce it further and put more points weighted toward like accelerating infill development. But I guess the question is if this was modeled after somebody else's, are we in jeopardize of having our whole application thrown out if we change that criteria?
I think that my sense is that the state's focus is just furthering those 3 objectives and then adjusting the weights between those top 3 factors. I think that the state would be okay with that.
Okay.
I don't think that that's a drastic change.
Yes, I'm John. Okay. So just drilling down a little bit, you think the big, obviously the state in this, there are 3 big concerns, or 1, 2, and 3 up there, which are 75% of our scoring.
Yes.
And then just if you could, how did you arrive at those 3 numbers, the 27, 23, and 25? And then how much play do you think realistically is there for us between those 3?
So this is the scoring that was used by Santa Barbara County Association of Governments that the state approved. But I think that there is some room to move those around too. That's the Santa Barbara region is different than ours, absolutely.
Sure.
Would you have any heartburn if I suggested that we did 30 for accelerated infill development, 25 for affirmatively furthering fair housing, and 20 for reducing vehicle miles traveled?
I can't speak for the state. I don't imagine that they would have terrible heartburn over that.
Okay.
I would hope. I think we can justify too why we're doing that for our region.
And infill development and reducing VMT go.
Right.
They go hand in hand.
That's what I was going to say. And I also think I just want to reiterate too, or maybe even ask the question, Meg, that I know that this was all developed through the REAP group, and the jurisdiction staff has been involved. Do you see, based on the conversations that happened there, any concern at the staff level at the jurisdictions to do something like that? And then my second part question, if it isn't going to be asked, I would want to know. Do you have any idea of what the next step would be if we made the change, submitted it, and it didn't work? I would just ask, I think the board at some level, could we have the authority to make any minor adjustments between the numbers that, if we made the changes that Director Silvera suggested, and then we have these numbers, could we have the authority to adjust those in response to any pushback from HCD that we might get, if that makes sense, so that we wouldn't have to wait a month to come back to the board and get, because there is that sensitivity of the timeline.
My sense from the discussions with the REAP work group, I think that focusing on infill, which does support reduced VMT and affirmatively furthering fair housing, I think that does make sense to the group.
Okay.
Anybody else? When they talk about fair housing, what specific steps are they looking for when it comes to?
Affirmatively furthering fair housing is more about overcoming patterns of segregation and then locating like higher density housing and higher opportunity areas in the community.
Okay.
Not so much as like programs for affordable housing.
Yeah.
Mixed use developments they're looking for.
Yeah. Mixed income. All right. Any thoughts, discussion, further?
Mr.
Motion.
Chair, I would love to make a motion on item 12A with putting in the new weighted scores of 30 for accelerating infill development, 25 for affirmatively furthering fair housing, and 20 for reducing vehicle miles traveled, and giving staff the ability that if they get major pushback from the state, that they could go with something similar to that.
All right. Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or any opposition to those numbers? All right. Everybody in support? All right, seeing everybody nod, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg.
I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay.
Okay, we got work to do. All right.
Look, gentlemen.
And that is.
All right, takes us to 12B, which, Mary Michael's item, which is the adoption of the One Voice Regional Policy Platform for 2023.
This is absolutely mission critical. We have to take action before we lose quorum.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's glasses. I mean, I know you don't, but just so you know.
Yeah.
Somebody left their glasses up here.
They nice?
I don't think so. Might have been the Congressman. Oh, Meg did.
Meg.
That Nav was pointing to himself, but then he's got them on right now. Like, I need a new pair.
I know, I did too. I was like,
Glad it wasn't our friends from Regional Waste. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pulling double duty here today. And I just want to, before I get started, let you know Ben Golding is here from Townsend Public Affairs on Zoom. If anyone has anything that he might be able to answer better than I as we go through this presentation. And I also want to point out, both for yourselves and for the public, which there's copies up here, but at the dais today you got 3 fact sheets which were received after the agenda was released from the City of Merced. So you have those materials in front of you today. We're here today. Today's action item is to adopt the 2023 One Voice platform for use this spring during our trip to DC. As you'll recall, our One Voice goals have not changed in the past few years, and they are listed here before you today and in your packet. And we were excited that Congressman Duarte was here today, and he seemed eager to participate in our process and participate in our delegation meetings, or his staff, and apparently his staff has already scheduled dinner with our delegation while we are in DC. So we appreciate Ben's work on that in advance. So we are here today. You saw this timeline a few months ago. The TRB had conducted a couple planning sessions. We received materials from the jurisdictions, as well as delegation fees. You are busy in your jurisdiction making your travel arrangements for your delegates. And this item was heard both by the Citizens Advisory Committee and the TRB earlier this month. It is before you today. And that platform includes major element of that is our transportation items. And I just wanted to highlight the State Route 59 portion today that you see in the presentation, because that was given to us by the City of Merced, as I mentioned, after this agenda was presented, and was not included in the platform, the versions of the platform that both the CAC and the TRB adopted. However, everything else is the same. So we have priorities that are about investment in rural regional projects, and we have a few specifically called out there. Continuing to support expanded passenger rail service. 2 policy points about YARTs, supporting transit into national parks. And the 5th bullet is a new one about establishing a policy where folks using public transit into national parks are not charged a gate fee. We've been working with our friends at the National Park Service about that one specifically as it pertains to YARTs. And then seeking expedited administrative review and funding opportunities around community airport infrastructure improvements. We have a couple of jurisdictions looking for some movement in those areas. We also have several items around community facilities, both the rehabilitation and restoration of historic buildings, as well as some community recreational facilities. We continue to have priorities around public safety, capital and personnel, and equipment funding. VASH vouchers for the for homeless folks in the community, a couple of water infrastructure projects and priorities, and then just a general priority to support any community funding requests that go to our federal legislative representatives, such as the ones mentioned about YARTS today, but we do know often that our cities and our county put forward their own projects that we want to collectively as a delegation support when we go back to DC. The delegate list is in your packet on page 257, so you can see who has signed up to go, and those delegates will start meeting as soon as this is adopted. Our first meeting is March 30th. You'll see that schedule here. I will just make a note, April 13th, we've changed to mark as tentative because there is a Cal Cities conference that week, so we'll check in with the delegates to see if they want to have that meeting or reschedule that meeting. And then the trip is slated for May 9th through 12th. And that is all I have for you today. And again, this is an action item to adopt the platform as presented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mary Michael. Any questions for Mary Michael? Director Pereira.
Yeah, could you go back to the screen with the policy? There you go.
This one?
So underwater,
Yeah.
the streamlined permitting process for creek maintenance.
Sure.
Are we pulling a federal permit for creek maintenance? Like a 404? Or? Oh, okay. All right, that was it.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, discussion, motions?
So moved. Second.
All right, any opposition?
Sorry, who was the second? Thank you.
Oh yeah, she's got to do double duty right now.
Yeah.
Nelson Pereira. All right, motion passes unanimous. Thank you, Mary Michael. Takes us to 12C, which Stacy informs me is mission critical.
It is.
To get this done today. So we
should have Elizabeth Forte on Zoom that will be coming up shortly. And we do, while she's doing that, I did place an amended air quality conformity checklist at your seats that have a little box that's highlighted in yellow. That is a change to that document that's included in your board packet. That has those changes have been made in response to public comment received from Caltrans. So that attached document at your seat will be included in the approved document. Okay, Elizabeth, I tried to buy you some time. It's all you.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So this is the big finale, hopefully, to our Regional Transportation Plan Amendment, FTIP Amendment, Air Quality Conformity and Environmental Impact Report documents. So what triggered these amendments were a couple of things I just want to bring up again. One of them is that some of our projects that look like they're new in this program really are just being added into our federal document so that they can move forward with federal environmental phases and things like that. So they need the authority to move forward. That's why they're there. Also, we had a number of rail projects, 3 large rail projects that were added to the project list. Rail is supported in the RTP that you all approved, but the request was to put in these projects with funding and dollar amounts and to make them eligible so that they can apply for state and federal funds, so that they could say, yes, MCAG has us in their, in their programs, and we're going to apply for federal funds. So it's in support of those types of activities that we needed to perform the amendment. So 2 things were triggered in this amendment. One was the air quality conformity, which we often have to do with this type of amendment, and also a reevaluation under CEQA. The CEQA evaluation showed that an addendum would be appropriate for this amendment because there were not substantial increases in the impacts or the severity of them, and it doesn't require new mitigation measures beyond what this board already approved in August of 2022. So the 2 actions that we're asking for today is for adopting the addendum to the program EIR for the RTP that you approved in August, and also to approve RTP Amendment 1, FTIP Amendment 1, and the air quality conformity analysis. We did hold a public hearing on March 2nd, and there were no comments there. And as Stacy mentioned, we got some comments from Caltrans, and you should have those in front of you. They're very minor additions to what they wanted in the conformity checklist as far as references in the document. So they're very minor. So the recommendation would be to approve. The staff recommendation would be to approve with those changes. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I also apologize for being the one that made the agenda so long this month.
That's 350 pages. We all read every word. Do anybody have any questions for Elizabeth? Okay, seeing none. Anybody from the public have any input? Again, seeing none. Back to the board for discussion and/or action.
I move to approve staff's recommendations.
Okay, motion from Director Nelson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Director McDaniel. Anybody opposed? Okay, again, seeing none. All in favor? Donnie? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Good job, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Liz. All right, takes us to 13, our discussion item. Mr. Nav, the 2023-24 budget.
Good afternoon, directors. It's that time of the year for the budget for the MPO. Elizabeth and I are going to be tag teaming on this one. So, Elizabeth, if you want to get started.
Okay, thank you. So we're talking about our transportation planning department budget, which you all know as the overall work program, or OWP. Can you go to the next slide? I can tell if it switched. Okay. So we're talking about the state requirements, federal requirements, and Measure B. So not our advocacy, which is not paid with state and federal money, to make that clear, and not our waste management or transit operations. It's about $6.3 million in general with this budget. Next slide, please. So as far as some of the ongoing work that MCAG does, I think you guys have heard some of these phrases enough. We manage a number of funding programs, congestion mitigation and air quality, regional surface transportation program. Those are two of our primary formula federal allocations that come directly through MCAG. Transportation Development Act funding, SB1 local partnership programming, those are state funds that come through MCAG, and it's routine that we, as a board, manages those. As far as planning activities, those first four you hear a lot about every year: our regional transportation planning, unmet transit needs, air quality conformity, and transportation modeling. There's plenty of that in your agenda today if you want to see a little bit about what that's like. Also, the regional housing planning is a big part of our budget. With the REAP 2.0, for example, that Meg was talking about, it's a large part of our budget next year. We have a good budget for a significant citizen participation. Also, lots of regional coordination going on, for example, in rail, air quality, of course, and goods movement. Next slide, please. So some of the completed tasks from 22-23, a couple of these will be wrapping up in the next few months. The amendment that just got approved, so we can say that was completed, our RTP amendment. Earlier this year, our travel model was approved, which was pretty significant. We pulled out of the 3-county model that was run by San Joaquin and adopted our own. Unmet transit needs, regional housing needs assessment, and you see at the bottom there a couple of housing or REAP 1 related items that you'll be hearing about in the next couple of months. Those will be kind of what we can show Caltrans and the others what we completed this year. Next slide, please. So some of our major projects, looking through our draft budget, is the multi-jurisdictional local road safety plan. You heard earlier from Marlon that the county was awarded an HSIP grant. The county has a local road safety plan, and our other agencies need them as well. You must have one to apply for HSIP, so we want to help everyone get up to date so they could apply for that program as well. Our multi-jurisdictional housing element for the agencies, electric vehicle plan. Some of these are ongoing, right? Our electric vehicle readiness plan, our active transportation plan, they're ongoing.
we're hoping to move forward the UC Merced Transit Consolidation Study. I know we've been hoping for a couple of years, so we're really getting going, working with them on that. Something we're proposing this year, we're calling it Mr. Map. So Merced Regional Multimodal Access Plan. And what we're looking at or proposing, this is with state grant funds, is to kind of help advance our development essentially in the 99 corridor by looking at other types of access to the corridor. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more as the year goes on, but maybe as, you know, we need to expand our scope beyond widening and look at the rail connections and the active transportation, et cetera, around Highway 99 so that we can really start to move projects forward in the state environment that we're in. So we're using state grant funds for that, we're proposing to. And then Measure V administration, of course, major projects in 23-24. Next slide, please. And passing it over to Nav.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Along with the major projects for fiscal year 22-23, there's other fiscal budget impacts. We're looking at conference room improvement, basically improving the IT in that conference room and expanding the conference room to hold our MCAG governing board meeting there. We're also looking at a cost of living adjustment of 5%. We're looking at one full-time position for a planner to help out with the Measure V for project deliveries, assist the jurisdiction on any other matter when it comes to Measure V, along with you know, some of the stuff, taking pictures or just, you know, checking with the jurisdiction about all the projects that are in the RTIP and all that. So that's one. And then we're also looking at an IT tech position, which it's a quarter of the budget. Salary is in this budget. It's not a full position, so it's only a quarter. The remaining 3 quarters are going to RWA, YARTS, and TJPA. Any questions so far? Questions?
I have a comment. Yeah, there was, my light's not on. On the slides that were in the agenda packet.
They're a little bit different.
They're a little bit different.
Yeah, Elizabeth and I made some adjustments.
Okay, very good. I'll point out something to you later. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So how is the MPO budget funded? You have PL funding from FHWA. You have FTA funds of 5303. Then you have complete street planning funds from FHWA. Then we get state funds, SB1 planning grants, as Elizabeth talked about, those multi-jurisdictional planning grants. And then we have PPM, what we call it. It's called Planning, Programming, and Monitoring, which we use for staffing. And then we have TDA funds, which is LTF funds. All this is subject to review by Caltrans, so that's why we're bringing in April. We had to submit a draft budget to Caltrans by March 1st and a final draft by May 17th. Next slide, please. So this is our funding sources, how the MPO is funded. It increased by $1.8 million. That's 39%, but majority of the increase is from the regional housing planning. As Meg talked about 2 items ago, is programming those funds into this budget so we can disperse it. Also, the SB1 grants, as you can see, went from 204 to 401. It's 2 years of funding grant. And then UC Merced is going to bring some funding to the table to do the study for next year. Next slide. So like I said, it increased by 39%. Majority of the increases are cost of living, 2 new positions, which is 1.25 position, potential merit increases, along with professional services, as Elizabeth talked about. Majority of the projects, like the multi-jurisdictional local road safety plans, the EV readiness plan, and the non-motorized, all that concludes in next fiscal year. So that's why if you look at the professional services, it went from 1.9 to $3 million. That concludes this budget. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Anyway. All right, seeing none. Any comments, discussion? All right, no direction needed today. I had one question potentially about the conference room, and just kind of wanted to gauge everybody's kind of temperature on the need for the separate. I know there's probably been discussion in the past about it, but you know, the need for a separate MCAG, you know, room to host meetings such as this.
Yeah, so it centralizes it, so everybody will go to MCAG instead of, you know, the county or the other jurisdictions. And we have it's not just this board, we also have a YARTS board, we also have the CAC, the COC, so we have other committees that utilize that room, and as we know, the committees are getting bigger and bigger, and the room is just, and I'm getting bigger and bigger, so, you know, we gotta spread out a little bit, so that's basically why it is. I mean, it just to host, and it's also our staff. When we do all staff meetings, we can't host everybody in one room. So we're growing out of that conference room that we have now.
Okay. I definitely want to, I think that's a really good point to raise. I don't want to suggest that by including this in the budget and the board approving it as part of the budget, that it is making the decision that that's where the board meetings will be held. That's still a policy decision of this board, but it will become an option available to you. As you know, when we have a full house here, we barely fit. So I think that's an important thing to make, that by doing these improvements to the conference room, it doesn't make the decision to hold board meetings there. That is a separate and distinct discussion that this board would have to have. But as Nab mentioned, we definitely could use the expanded space, and also I say like grown-up IT established there. Right now, I kid you not, when we use our conference room for virtual meetings, we put the camera on a tissue box because of just the way the room is configured, and so this would include actually getting the audio and the visual all connected to be in this virtual world we now live in. And we do host our YARTS meetings virtually and everything else, that we'd have a grown-up conference room. That's the technical term.
Trying to be like Merced.
No, they got TVs that don't line up.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Nev. Keep trying. We'll see if. All right. I think that's it. Takes us to the executive director's report, and turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to add other than a happy birthday wish to Elizabeth. Today is her birthday, and she deserves it because she had a heck of a time making herself available for this board meeting because of some FHWA travel and weather. So happy birthday to Elizabeth, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's anything that needs my attention, I'll take those down and work on them.
All right. Questions? Takes the 19 directors report, starting on my left. Director Yanez.
Got nothing.
Director McDaniel.
Those of you who picked Arizona, your bracket is busted. They just lost.
What was their number?
Man. No.
Yeah.
Geez, well,
Spoiler alert.
Joe Biden, they picked him to go all the way.
A lot of people did.
Shoot.
I like a good upset.
Anything, Scott?
There's a few of them today.
April.
No, I have nothing.
Jose and Pat, anything? Okay. That is it. I just wanted to thank Director Espinosa-Lepa. I wanted to thank him. We're going to, working with him, partnering with him to do with it. And what Marlon was talking about earlier, the Clean California Day, we're going to try to show Planada some love and go out to Planada on March 25th. So happy to partner with him. And we're going to go out there if anybody can make it March 25th. Most of the day from 9 to 3 in Planada. We'll do some cleanup per the Clean California Day, and just try to help uplift Planada as well at that time. So happy to try to take a lot of our people from Merced out to Planada to do some work. So be good. Adjournment motions.
Adam Admiral for your planning that.